Hello, and welcome to the Coach Right podcast, where we explore how to turn coaching expertise into published pages. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, portfolio career specialist, author, and creator of Coach Right, the writing space and program specifically designed for coaches. You can get the episode show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachright.co.uk. It's time for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. Helen here, recording on Wednesday, the 13th of May, 2026, and this is episode 22. Today, I have two guests, Alice Driscoll and Louise Van Haarst, and we'll be talking all about their book, Smart Conflict. Yes, you heard that correctly. I'm recording on a Wednesday, and that's because this weekend I am heading to Granada in Spain to visit the Alhambra. It's a World Heritage Site that looks absolutely magnificent, made up of 3 separate palaces that date back to the 13th and 14th centuries. This is going to be a solo trip, so for 5 days I am going to be exploring and refilling my creative well. I am really looking forward to it. Coincidentally, I've also been reading Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which is one of those books that's been on my to-be-read list for as long as I can remember. For those who aren't familiar with the premise, Cameron talks about how to find your way from creative block to creative flow. She talks about going on what she calls an artist's date, where you, and only you, head off to do something that will provide you with inspiration. My solo trip to Granada is most definitely an artist's date. And while I don't underestimate the privilege I have in being able to do it, I am increasingly learning how essential it is to replenish, refocus, and re-energize my creativity. But an artist date doesn't have to be a trip abroad. It can be something simple that you enjoy, but rarely spend the time to do. So one of the exercises she recommends is where you sit down and list 20 things that you enjoy doing. And that can be anything from reading a book to going for a walk. And once you have that list, you reflect on when the last time was that you did those things. And then you make time to do one of them. And when she says make time, what she actually means is schedule time. So, for example, if baking is one of your favourite things to do, think about when the last time was that you made a cake. Possibly it was for a birthday or a special event. Block out a couple of hours this weekend and do just that. That is an artist's date. I really like this idea. The thing that makes it special is it's something that you do for you, just for you, and you prioritize it. You put it in the diary and you protect the time. It's not one of those things you say you're going to do unless something more important needs your attention. You say, on Wednesday at 7 p.m, I'm going to go to the cinema on my own to watch this particular film because that is something that I love to do and it re-energizes me. Isn't that absolutely wonderful? And how many of us actually do that? In personal news, I am absolutely delighted to say that all of the self-editing and the endless citations that are the Resilience book are now complete. I have just emailed my editor to confirm my slot, and I am starting to think about finalising the title and putting together my ideas to give to my cover designer. The end is most definitely in sight. As often happens, as I come towards the end of one book, I start to think about the next one. And for non-fiction, that idea is starting to take shape. Over the past month, I've been running a series of writing sprints for the EMCC. And one of the attendees mentioned that they were working on the introduction for their book before they'd written it. And they said something along the lines of them knowing that that's not the thing that you are supposed to do first. And aren't supposed's wonderful things? Because I always write my introduction first. For me, it's about setting an intention for the book. It helps to consolidate my thinking around who my reader is and of all of the things that I want the book to provide for them. That introduction forms the basis of what then becomes the structure of the book. And as a free writing exercise, I find it incredibly powerful to work through a commitment to that person, the one that I hope will get value from the book, before I set out on creating anything structural. Now, of course, what becomes the introduction in the final book will inevitably be edited and vary from that original writing exercise, but it provides a valuable launchpad for the process. For those of you that are curious about the fiction title I mentioned in the last episode, I am reviewing what I want to do with that manuscript. I've plugged it into Claude along with some key structural changes that I would like to make to that original that was written all those years ago. And I have a structural edit report along with pages of notes of my own that I'm going to start working through over the summer. I absolutely refuse to put any pressure on fiction. It is very much for fun, and I'm excited to be working on a project that makes me smile so much. There will be an awful lot of research required for the next non-fiction title, so this will be a perfect counterbalance. There's definitely something in nurturing the playful child that comes with creating a mystery. In publishing news, the big change happening this May is Audible. Amazon's platform for audiobooks have just announced that they are changing their royalty model. The way Audible has worked until now, listeners have credits to use on audiobooks, and if they choose to listen to yours, you would get a percentage of that. The new model is more complicated and is based on something that they are calling member value. ACX, the creator platform behind Audible, describes this as, at its core is member value, the price of a listener's monthly membership plan, for example, standard or premium, minus taxes and fees. When a member uses additional credits that month, we add the value of that credit to the member value. That total is then divided proportionally among the titles the member engaged with based on their a la carte price, and your share is multiplied by your contractual royalty rate to determine your payment. The change is coming into effect on the 26th of May. And as with the other changes we've seen in the industry, views on it vary. For some, it's likely to improve discoverability and therefore growth, while for others, it might reduce margins. And as with all services like these, it's going to depend on what authors are using the platform for. It's worth remembering that Audible isn't the only audiobook subscription platform in town. Spotify has driven a change in the market where premium subscribers have 15 hours of listening across all titles. I'm sure we're going to continue to see further changes over the coming months as publishers across platforms consider their market position and changing reader behaviour. In coaching news, conference season is upon us. As I'm recording this, the EMCC annual conference is in full swing in Croatia with the theme of Beyond the Known. They describe it as an invitation to explore new ways of being in our presence and practice, new pathways of becoming in our professional and personal growth, and new approaches to leading in increasingly complex and evolving contexts. What an incredible theme. It's so apt to the world we're living in at the moment, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the reflections for those that attend. We're also right in the middle of the ICF International Coaching Week, which has the tagline Empower, Inspire, Celebrate. There are over 1,000 events listed on their website for members around the world, and again, I'm sure there will be lots of powerful insights shared by the attendees. As you know, I am a huge fan of in-person events, both for peer connection and for the energy, so I'm sure they're going to be really valuable to the attendees. If that's you, please do drop me a note and let me know how you found them. Friend of the show, Ian McCormick, is featured in the latest edition of Coaching at Work, where he talks about his methodology that forms the basis of his book, Frustration Inoculation. Ian shared his path to publication in episode 19, and it's wonderful to see his work being profiled in the community. Right, that's enough from me. Let's get on with the interview with Alice and Louise. It's time for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. Today I'm joined by Alice Driscoll and Louise Van Haarst, co-founders of the Powerhouse, a global leadership development and culture change business on a mission to build conflict-competent cultures in organisations everywhere. As part of that mission, they've co-authored best-selling book, Smart Conflict: How to Have Hard Conversations at Work. Welcome to the show, Alice and Louise.
Thank you so much.
And welcome as our first co-authors on the show at the same time. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And can we start by telling us all about you and your path to publication?
Yes. So why don't I sort of talk about how we met, Alice, and kind of take us up to there. And maybe you can talk about then the path to publication after the magic of us meeting. So Alice and I met at Henley Business School. We were on the same master's program in coaching and behavior change, but we were in different cohorts, and we met by accident on a mentoring call. Obviously, part of your accreditation, you need to do a certain amount of mentoring, and part of that, as you'll probably know and your listeners will know, you have to bring cases that you're working on. And I noticed quite quickly that Alice and I were bringing some unusual cases compared to maybe some of our colleagues. We were working with people in a particular way, people who were perhaps working in quite an intense way with us. We were often dealing with some, conflict in different ways. And I thought, there is a kindred spirit. There is somebody who is working in a really similar way to me. I need to get to know that person. And apparently Alice was having a similar thought. So we had a few coffees, we kind of got to know each other. And I think at the time, Alice was thinking about something called courageous conversations or something along those lines in your practice. And you said, I kind of could do with a co-facility. Do you want to come along and see how it goes? And we sort of worked on one session together. And what we discovered in time was that although Alice was working around sort of de-escalating a lot of conflict in her practice, she's a mediator, and she was sort of focusing on that area. I was also working in conflict, but I wasn't calling it that, but helping people who were finding themselves sort of paralyzed by a really difficult situation or a conversation they felt they couldn't have, often at scale. This is sort of C-suite and having to deal with change programs and really sort of tricky moments in their careers. I was helping them to tolerate the discomfort, have the hard conversations, deal with any kind of conflict that came from that, repair the relationship and move on. And we realized sort of over a bit of time of experimenting with this workshop and taking it through a few iterations, that if we put it together, we kind of had this whole methodology, which didn't at that point have a name.
Brilliant. Amazing. Alice, can you pick up the story from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Louise kind of mentioned, what our work together really started by naturally evolving and meeting the demand of trying to put together the best possible kind of training, kind of workshop series for teams in organizations to really support them to have difficult conversations, whether they were already having too many of them and not in a very productive way, or because they were avoiding having them all together or something in between. And so we started our kind of collaboration, but also working through the methodology in the room and with people. And I think, quite early on, I sort of just put the idea on the table of saying, look, I think there'd be value maybe in looking to write this in a book format and have that asset that we have. But also, I think it came from a few places. One, a genuine, I suppose, curiosity about the experience of writing a book. And I've always been somebody who isn't afraid to take on the unknown or challenges, not because I think I'd be good at anything or everything, but because I don't mind if I'm not. So I think there was an element of that. So I was sort of I was playing over in my mind, and I said to Louise, would you be interested in writing a book about this? And I mean, I think I expected Louise to be like, oh, I don't know, let me think about it. But she went, oh, yes, please, where do I sign? Let's do it right now. And I was like,
yeah, because I think it was interesting that you'd had this in your mind, but I'd always assumed that I would write a book about something one day. And I just sort of hadn't got around to it. So when you said it, I was like, yeah, let's just kind of, because I think I'm a bit like you. I'm a very much a say yes and work it out later type of person. So I think the sort of stars aligned.
Exactly. So we both sort of jumped in 2 feet in this project that, and I think there was a few reasons that we were both kind of ready to jump into feet first. partly, I think, because of what we've just outlined, which is I think our personalities are, we quite like doing interesting things and pushing ourselves and finding out what's possible. But also, one of the things that drew me to Louise in those mentoring groups was that there was quite clearly a very astute commercial approach to building, a business, building a career, that I also come from a commercial background as a managing director of a business before sort of switching careers. And so I think there was a match in terms of our focus and ambition for growing something that was bigger than ourselves. And ideally doing that around something we were super interested in. But both were important. And I think we both had understood the role that a book could play in developing the business. And it sort of just ticked every box. It was a way of reaching more people and giving people at a kind of very low price point some really valuable tools. So there's a democratization piece for sure. But I don't think that alone would have been enough. It's that great it does that, but also it's going to do something amazing potentially for us. And our thing was just like, okay, well, we're determined not to write a bad book because that's not going to help anyone or help us.
No.
But I don't think we didn't dare to set the ambition for ourselves that we would write a really good book objectively, having not written at scale. But what I was so interesting is once we got writing, Louise suddenly remembered, actually, she had sort of, if she looked back on it, done quite a bit of writing. It turned out she's an absolutely incredible writer. So that helped us an awful lot.
Yeah, but I think on the commercial point, it is worth saying to people who are coaches and who are thinking about writing a book, I think there was a Venn diagram, but we were thinking very much about, okay, so how do we sort of drive, this thing that we have developed and we're very passionate about, and we know that people want to buy it, and we know that it's really effective. Every time we do this thing, everybody says, I think everybody needs to do this. So we kind of knew that there was something there that, one, was a good product, but two, that we loved doing, we felt was important. But we were very much thinking about sort of business development drivers. And the book started off from that kind of commercial lens of thinking, oh, this is like a very elaborate business card. But then the more we got into it, and other people do write very quickly written books with AI, all those kind of things, which would tick that book box. You can hold it in a picture and, it will be an elaborate business card. We both realized that we could not write a bad book. We just couldn't, because we believe in excellence. We do believe in academic rigor. We have some very impressive, smart colleagues that we didn't want to be embarrassed in front of. But also in terms of readers, we really believe in this and we want to do something that's useful. So there was a kind of importance in making it commercially targeted and a good idea to invest all this time in, because it does take a lot of time, and therefore that's time that you're not using to earn other things. So there is a cost to that for sure. But also we wanted it to be useful to the end reader. So I think there's sometimes a bit of a reticence to say something needs to be commercially important and a driver of business. You think, well, I must write something that is useful. And I think what we've learned is that you can do both. And as you're planning to do it, really thinking about how that can do both is important, because we can talk about this a bit more, but what we're realizing is the book has been out for under 6 months. How long is it now? About 6 months.
It's probably 6 months since the book launch, which we'll come on to later, because it was very good.
And it is doing work for us while we sleep constantly. It's amazing that it is out there doing work for, obviously we're working hard to promote it and all these things, but it is surprising the number of things that sort of come through spontaneously as it's out there in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I hear you talk, there is a values alignment between the two of you. There is a work ethic alignment between the two of you. There is a very clear purpose in a problem that you've identified that you are seeking to solve, and how your commercial ecosystem supports that purpose. And isn't it wonderful how somebody always goes, we should write a book about that? And you go, oh, really? So much to pick up on there, but let's start right at the beginning of the process. You've both gone, amazing, we want this challenge, we're going to write a book, we've got the topic, we've got the why behind it. How do you go from blank page to published manuscript?
Yeah, shall I kick us off, Louise? Well, I think the reality is that it wasn't a blank page for us, because we had developed the workshop. And I think it's important to kind of make that point, because it gave us a confidence when we first sat down to say, we know the questions that we get asked in the room. We know the bits, we know what people are struggling with. We really understand the audience. And so we had a very, very clear idea in our head of who we were writing for. And we got given some good advice to think of someone specific each.
Yeah.
So you're just writing the book for that individual. So we didn't struggle to think of people and we'd had the conversation about this topic with those individuals.
Yeah.
It's very easy. And I think the second thing is that we had done all the research and in order to build a really effective training module. So whilst we did find a few more papers to back up further points and so on and so forth. And we'd also just come off the back of starting our masters in behavior change. So much of the material came from that, but also years of study in other forms. So I think compared to some writers who are sitting down saying, I'm going to write a book about something that I don't know much about yet, for us, it was a question of just getting down on paper from collecting all corners of our brain and trying to just structure it into something that made sense. Our biggest challenge was overwriting.
Yeah.
The hardest thing we had to do was lose how many words?
3,000 words.
Yeah.
So if you think the maximum you can really have in the paperback size we wanted was 46,000 words, we wrote I think 70 odd. So yeah, it was about 23,000, and that was that was the hardest bit of it, was to cut it down. So I would say to anybody listening to try and be rigorous with yourself about overwriting, because it's so hard to then kill your darlings, to go, oh, I love this bit, and we're like, it's got to go. It's too long.
The hardest chapters to write were probably the introduction and the conclusion, because those we had to write from scratch, because there was no blueprint for that. And then you have to really sort of dig deep and think, because the introduction, of course, is all about why are we writing this and what. But in terms of the overall structure, we had some good support from our publisher, but I think we proposed a structure. I think she tweaked it 10%.
But that was what was interesting. I think that's why we also didn't have a blank page, because trying to go out and find a publisher that was right and that was willing to kind of work with us, you have to write a book proposal, and it has to be quite detailed. It has to say, why are you writing this book? What's going to be in it? Why will anybody care about? Why would they read it? What are the actual chapter headings you're going to use? And what is going to be in those chapters? So I remember filling that in for various publishers, and based on the discussions that we'd had. And then that is what we came back to. And we did change some of the headings, and, it evolved, but it meant that you're very much not writing from a blank page. You kind of worked out the flow, the argument, the why. And then that really helped later in terms of working as co-authors, which was completely new to both of us. And we had to work out that as we went along, but that made that a lot easier as well, because we could say, okay, here are the number of chapters we've got, who's going to write what. It's much easier to kind of divide the writing in that way. So, but I think if we were to do it again, that was one of the best things we did, which was to really map it out before we'd written anything.
Yeah, absolutely. You can start from a blank page and free write and see how you get on. But with nonfiction, most of the time, for most people, at least the semi-structure makes it a lot easier. And like you say, you move things around and it becomes a bit of a patchwork. Of course it does, but it just gives you that container to put the thinking in. And I'm curious, so how did you go about selecting the publisher that you worked with?
Should I go? It was interesting. We did talk to, I can't remember how many, 3 or 4. I think it really came down to kind of ethos and fit. So, we spoke to very good people who I think we could have written with. But when we came to practical inspiration, I think the fact that Alison has a very respectable, long career in traditional publishing, the fact that so many of her books are really excellent business books. So we kind of had that experience already. And having a mix of that sort of coaching support, but the machinery of a traditional publisher really, I think, ticked all the boxes for us. What would you say, Alice?
Yeah, I think it was an easy decision. And I think also I think she got the book, she got us. And I think the level of support was exactly what we needed. So it's you write the book yourself, just to be like really clear. I think we're a bit surprised quite how hands off sometimes these processes are.
Mm.
But I think what we were able to borrow from Alison was her confidence in us.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, it was a really great experience.
Amazing. And people that are interested in co-authoring a book, that's almost like an additional challenge, isn't it? Because if it's just yours, you can just sit down and do it however you want to do it. But of course, there's two of you and you run a business together. And so how did that work practically and kind of emotionally, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I think it's only looking back on quite even sort of launching our business together, writing the book together. There are so many things that you only really discover along the way. And I think we have been extraordinarily lucky with quite how aligned we are in our thinking about things. So it's so unusual. I can only think of like one or two tiny things where we haven't immediately just seen eye to eye on like almost everything. But obviously, we've got a good process for sort of like really trying to listen and make sure we understand the perspective and then making a call on things when there isn't an immediate eye to eye. But I think with the book writing, we were quite kind of straightforward about it, really. We just went,
Yeah.
"Okay, you write this 50% of it, I'll write this for 50% of it as a first draft. And then we'll put it together and we'll both read it through from top to bottom and kind of see where have we massively repeated ourselves, where we didn't know until we read through that first draft, how far off was it going to be tonally? How is it going to work with, is it going to be like two voices, and all those things. And I think we did have a slightly different reaction to our read through the first draft. I was like, it's great. And Louise was like, there's so much work to do, which definitely lends itself a little bit to our differing experiences with writing. And we were both right, to be honest. So the truth was probably somewhere more in the middle.
Mm.
But it wasn't, I think, there wasn't really a preciousness there. So I think we both rewrote parts of each other's chapters. It was pretty fluid. And also I think we did find some differences in our kind of preferences, didn't we, in terms of where we put the energy. So like I was in charge of referencing
Yeah.
because I don't find that too.
Yeah, yes. It was an interesting one. So when we were trying to pull it together, we definitely had a preference. So I was like, I will do a full review rewrite on the whole manuscript for voice to make sure that it sounded like one voice and we were being consistent in how we sound when we write it. But I was like, I cannot stand the idea of doing these. And Alice is like, I'm very happy to do the references. So we had this sort of time, which was, I mean, it's hard. It's looking back, it's hilarious. It's hard to describe how much time pressure we were under, how much life pressure that we were under outside of work. The business was going through a sort of this rapid scaling period where we had some incredible client work. But now I look back, the amount that we were dealing with was intense. But I think the reason that it sort of worked from the start is we do sort of have a pragmatism, generally, the pair of us, which I think is where we are aligned. So when we had the breakdown, I remember saying, well, who's going to write what? And you go, well, you go first. And I was like, well, I'd like to write this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit. And you went, oh, that's great, because those are all the bits I don't want to write. So that worked, but it was very pragmatic. Nobody was sort of wrangling over what to do. And then we wrote it. And then we ended up very, very close to the deadline. And we just sort of had this pragmatic period of time where I used to get up at 5 a.m. We used to write literally all day with the kids, sort of having to feed the kids and stuff in between. And we would just go through this intense to-do list it's a lot to do when you've got 50,000 words to perfect and reference and make sure it's working. But I just sort of remember us going, all right, okay, where are you in the manuscript? Oh, I'm here, right, you're there, right, what have we got to do? Where's the image? Okay, what's the title for this? It was just a process. It was kind of like just getting it done. So, but I think what also helps is being busy, having so much going on that we had to be pragmatic. The kids still need feeding, there was a lot happening. And I think that helped it keep it in its proper place. And I think that's the other thing, is not overthinking it. Has been obviously we committed to excellence, but you can do that to a point that it's paralyzing. I think we had a real kind of pragmatic view that you can only write the book you can write today.
That is true. And I think the reason that it was easy to make pragmatic, small decisions day to day is because of how completely aligned we were about the kind of book we were trying to write.
Mhm.
So I think where it can come unstuck is if one person's trying to write something more poetic and one person wants to write a bullet pointed, you know, how-to guide, and then you sort of get into, then you're going to be making different moment to moment decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that alignment is, it's a classic of a high performing team, right? So, you've got that kind of shared purpose around what is it we're here to do and how are we doing it, then everything else is much more likely to fall in line.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite often call it writing in the margins. And it is that high performing mindset, isn't it? If you've got the goal, you have to look to the margins to find the time to do the extra thing.
Yeah.
And still, as you say, committing to producing the best possible book
Yeah.
that you can produce.
Definitely.
And the next book will always be better because, of course, it will. That's how things work. But I'd love to talk about your book launch. So I was very fortunate to join you at your book launch. So
Yes.
thank you very much for the invitation. Why did you decide to do a formal book launch?
Why did we decide? Well, again, I think there's a few reasons. I think, again, that commercial mindset was, this is a fantastic opportunity to shout from the rooftops about is something that we really believe in. Also to celebrate all the people who have been involved along the way. So, there was a mix of having a great party and the celebration. But I think there was a thing to say, this is an event which helps to get this on the radar as much as we can for something that we have worked very hard on and that kind of puts our kind of mission out in the world. So again, I don't think if it hadn't have had a reason other than having a good party, I don't think we would have done it in quite the way that we did. What would you say, Alice?
Yeah, I think it was two things, wasn't it? Yeah, it was, as you say, the commercial piece, but also I think a chance to, it's only one life, isn't it? It's just a chance to sort of celebrate, a good excuse really to just kind of have a nice time and get people together. And, it was great. We had such a nice time. So I think so did lots of people who came. Um, yeah, it was great.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it's probably about 6 months ago now since the book has been published. And of course, unfortunately, publishing a book isn't something that you just press the yellow button on Amazon and then suddenly it's done and then it sells forevermore. What have you been doing since then
In terms of promoting the book.
in terms of promoting the book?
What have we been doing since then? Well, we've been doing lots of things like this. So we've been there's been a lot of podcasting. There's been a lot of sort of webinars for closed community groups. There's been a lot of sitting on panels at events, sort of effectively it has done a great job at kind of putting us in the position of credible expert in this particular bucket. And so the invitations have really kind of opened up and doors have opened. I mean, quite specifically for the first quarter of this year, it's got us onto the Thinkers 50 Radar 30 list. And, that's not something you apply for. We had absolutely no idea about any of that. And it's the book that effectively has got us on the list. So that was really sort of surprising and exciting. And more recently, we've just become a finalist at the Business Book Awards.
Yeah.
So it
Congratulations.
feels nice to have some kind of objective kind of, what's the right word, recognition for the writing. But yeah, we've been, meanwhile, busy delivering projects for clients. I think we have in the last 6 months trained about 30,000 people in our methodology across a number of different organizations. So we have been very busy.
And I think that organic kind of sales, we could, is one of those things that's, if you see 30,000 people over a period of time, a proportion of them are going to be intrigued and buy the book. So we can't really say where sales have come from. What we do know is it's from the sales figures are, they lag quite a long way. So we're looking at figures that were from a long time ago, even now, but it's doing pretty well in terms of sales. But it's hard for us to track where it's come from, because the other thing which is really interesting is I get quite a lot of messages, and I think you do too, Alice, from people saying, I have given this to every single one of my clients, or I have bought a copy for every single one of my team.
Yeah.
That's happening quite a lot, the kind of recommendation, people gifting it. So it's, again, that those are things that we couldn't drive. Like, that's come from a reader who has found it useful and wants to give it. So I think there's a sort of, it's doing its work out there. I think if it wasn't a useful book, it wouldn't be doing that.
Absolutely. And again, it's that balance, isn't it, between the book of your heart, the book of your purpose, and the book of your business acumen all together. It would be remiss of me not to ask the AI question.
Mm-hmm.
How, if at all, did you use AI in your process?
I think the only thing we attempted to do from memory was to see if it would help with the referencing process. And we learned very quickly it did not, because it would produce, well, maybe for you, because I didn't have much to do with it. But a few times I tried to reference things, it would produce very, very correct looking references, which were hallucinated. So when the development editor looked at it, or whoever it was, she went, I can't find this reference anywhere. And I was like, oh, yeah. So, but you had more luck with it.
No, I think it's just understanding that it can do that. So we used AI a lot to find, sort of niche references, just to see, was there something out there? Is there something, what if any research has kind of found this very particular point? So things where we were like, that might, where is it our experience, or actually, is there anything particularly to back up this point? So we probably used it for sort of like maybe 10 to 15% of our referencing, like maximum, but never at face value.
Yeah,
so
you always have to check.
Double check everything. And whilst it does hallucinate, it also does genuinely help, like, you dig out like quite niche, genuine research. So I'd say it's an incredible tool, and we did use it. But I think we were writing, I think before, I feel like things have changed. Of course they have. They've moved on again since because if you think about it, we finished writing our book a year ago. And I think the norms around using AI, even just to support the writing itself, have probably changed. But I think we wrote a LinkedIn post about the benefits of writing a book predominantly not using AI in terms of, and I think because we went into this as an experience, whilst AI can speed things up, then you skip the cognitive experience of having to kind of formulate your words and to like really do that thinking. And I think we really benefited, and the business has benefited from us doing that really high quality thinking, because it has absolutely, whilst nothing really brand new went into the book in terms of what we were already working with in our business, it absolutely sharpened our thinking and showed up a couple of gaps, or showed us where we were like, we've been saying this for quite a long time. We know it came from somewhere, but where did it come from? It's just forced that due diligence. So it really sharpened and tightened up the work and fed back into the work that we do in person with people. And I wouldn't wish to have skipped that.
No, and I think there is some danger there, because I think what you can end up with is a very technically correct, neatly written thing that's already been said. And I think the reason that I think we were very, very disciplined in not using it for the writing is to make sure that we were writing stuff that we believed in, that really reflected what was going on in our practice. If the real things that had come from our clients, real case studies, we had to anonymize them quite carefully, and sometimes they're aggregated, but they're real. I can see now, a year later, like we were messing around with ChatGPT. It wasn't even that brilliant at that time. A year later, it's so much better already. I can completely see how you could be really tempted to go, oh, just do me a first draft, or oh, just tinker with this. And I do think there is a bit of the danger, both in terms of not doing the cognitive work, but also in terms of accidentally plagiarizing or those kind of things. It's not something that I would want to do.
Interesting. It's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, again, I've been a writer for as long as I can remember, and I'm like, why would I outsource the writing bit? That's the best bit. I mean, the blurb on the back of the cover. Yes, help me with that. References, I use it all the time. You do have to double check them, because it does get them wrong, but it does speed up the process. So those sorts of things, amazing. But the writing's the good bit.
I guess for some people it's not. Some people it's really, really hard. And I can see, if you're writing an elaborate business card, there's something incredibly pragmatic about writing a brilliant prompt that does that. And within, a week, you could have that up on Amazon. I'm kind of not being a naysayer about people using different things for BD, But I think you have to think about the pros and cons and actually the purpose and the knock-on effects of that later on. If you're trying to be, if you then want to hold a kind of expert position somewhere, that might not serve you long term.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there is always something in connecting back with who the ideal reader is, because again, that it's almost irrelevant what we as writers think. It's what the reader thinks. Some readers are, I'm not really bothered if it's AI generated, like I just want the information. And some people are very anti, and some people are very comfortably on the fence and are like, for this book, I've connected with these writers, so I would like to find out more about what they think. And for some books, they're not so bothered. So again, it's just tailoring your approach to the product that you want to produce.
And it does depend on who and what type of audience and what filters they're using. We went on one podcast a while ago and I was really shocked that he said, it's so nice to read a real book. You've actually written a real book. He said, said so many authors are pitching to me to come on the podcast, and they are very patently, very quickly written sort of AI generated books. And he said, I just don't have them on. And I was quite surprised because that was a while ago. That was like 6 months ago. And I thought, gosh, it's much more prevalent than I think. But again, as a BD tool, rock on if that works, but you can see how it's not passing some gates and some filters in the same way as a, traditionally author generated book is still going to pass those gates.
Yeah, it's a conversation that's worth having in another 6 months' time, isn't it? To see, obviously Amazon, Barnes and Noble have literally in the last fortnight put a limit on how many books you can have against your author name. So so they've said 100 books.
Oh, well, that's quite a lot.
Well, you say that, but I know authors who do what we call rapid release, mostly in fiction, and they have more than 100 titles to their name.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, fiction, I think, is slightly different because you have a certain formula and you develop a world and, these people do this full time. That is their career. Slightly different from a thought leadership piece, which you obviously spend quite considerable amount of time researching and forming what you think. But the reason that Barnes and Noble have done that is because of the AI content farms. And I think that's what we're saying, isn't it? It's that content farming that is slightly something that we're probably feeling we haven't quite worked out what we think about yet. I know I haven't, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So lots of exciting things with the book, lots of exciting things coming up. The one thing we haven't talked about is the cover, which I think is absolutely fantastic and really meets those market expectations while standing out, which is a really delicate balance to get. How did you come up with the cover design?
Oh, shall I give a quick summary?
Yes.
It was really difficult, actually. We had been told before working with our publisher from people who've worked with any publisher, like traditional, hybrid, or self-publishing, that everyone said, oh, the cover design is really hard. It's hard because everyone's got different opinions. It's hard because, publishing is not a wealthy industry and it does not have the funds and the means to hire extraordinary design talent. And so I think we went into it going, oh, maybe publishing houses and designers who specialize in doing books know something important. So you sort of make, and I think the designs that came back was so bad, like so bad in terms of being, and what is bad is the problem with design, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. But I think Louise and I are quite, let's say, aesthetically sensitive.
Very well put.
You'd say that is very true.
Yeah. It matters a lot to us that, we have a certain sort of, I suppose, aesthetic that we like, again, which is actually quite aligned. And so in the end, we spoke to lots of other authors and said, what did you do? And all the book covers were so bad. And everyone went, oh yeah, I don't know what it is, but publishing houses are really bad at this. You get it done yourself. So we found somebody who was not a book cover designer, but had done some books, whose overall kind of look and feel and style we liked. And we found them, online, and we just emailed them and said, we're looking for this. This is our brief. And I guess, we'd had the benefit of seeing what we didn't like.
Yeah. And there were some sort of close contenders. And we did what I would highly recommend. We sent them out to various professional and personal networks, like WhatsApp groups of, people that we have. and said, what do you think? And be brutally honest. And they were brutally honest. And it was so helpful. Because I remember one had chess pieces on and they're like, but that looks like you're being manipulative. It looks like you're playing a game. And I was like, very good. Like, I was like, I like it aesthetically, but actually the signaling of that is not what we're trying to do. So all of that was quite helpful. And then we tried and tried to try. And I remember once, gosh, it was a very interesting time, Alice, and you weren't getting much sleep. And you went, it's come to me in a dream, Louise. I've got this image. I've got this image of a sparkler. And I was like, all right. So we sent that, and somehow all the references that we'd given her in terms of what we liked, and then that image, she managed to put it together, and it just sort of came together. But it is an interesting one. And I would say, just to normalize it, visual taste is such a difficult thing. It's even hard for you to describe in words what you're after. I think just to go, it is a hard thing. Go and find your own designer, then you kind of really are fully in control of it. And as long as it's nothing, dreadful, the publisher is usually delighted that you've gone out and found something that really works, because we were very committed to making it sort of work commercially, visually, but also being on brand.
I think the one thing that is helpful is to just go to a bookshop and just look at loads of book covers and just go, what do you, and it also makes you realize quite how bad most of them are. It was difficult, wasn't it, to find ones that we liked. So it's a funny old game.
I'm a huge advocate of a mood board. And when I say mood board, it makes it sound very artistic, doesn't it? But I literally have a Word document and I take screen grabs.
That's what we
did. And I'm like, these are the ones that I like. And then you go, oh, they're all blue. Maybe my cover should be blue.
Yeah.
Or,
Otherwise, it's
or whatever.
It's not fair to a designer unless you go, when I say what good, this is what I mean. They're like, completely different. And the other 20 authors I'm working with who've got completely different idea of what good looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we're about a year since the book was finished written and about 6 months since you published. Have you got the bug? Will there be another one in the future, do we think?
I think there are definitely, I suffer from this anyway. I've always got more ideas than I could ever possibly execute. So I definitely think there is the potential there. We have a lot of work on, and will hopefully continue to do so. And I think we've got to be realistic about how much we should take on in the next year or so. I think we learned from another author who's, I think, on his fourth or fifth book. We were having a chat with him and he said, oh yeah, I've written my next one, but that's not coming out because I think this one's got another 2 or 3 years in it. And we're like, this is a kind of mindset that we haven't got into. And I think we've barely begun to really get the most out of Smart Conflict yet. I think there can be that urge to think, right, we must write another one. We must get something fresh. And I think learning from him, I don't quite know what that means, but I think we need to make sure that we have got the most possible out of the good, the great book that we have written before then getting on with the next one. What would you say, Alice?
Yeah, seems like a good summary of what we've talked about. So the answer is never say never.
Not yet.
It makes sense that at some point that would probably happen. Firm plans.
Watch this space. And of this amazing journey that you've been on, what lessons would you share with anyone listening today that's thinking, that sparked my creativity?
What lessons would we share? I think don't kind of overestimate having a plan for what you want to write. So it's great to have a concept. It's great to kind of have a central idea that you want to write, but then be really strict with yourself to say, so therefore, who is the person who's going to care about this? Therefore, what does it need to contain? Is it theoretical? Is it a handbook? Is it inspirational? Is it a business text? Sort of do that thinking beforehand, do that planning, come up with an outline, and then interrogate yourself on, is this something I would want to read? Do I think somebody else would want to read this? Because I think what it would be quite easy to do is go, I've got this fantastic idea and I've got a central premise. And then it's very hard to execute it because you lose steam because you're like, what is it and who is it for? So I think don't underestimate the importance of doing that boring thinking in advance and then doing some mapping, because then you will have enough freedom, but enough structure that you can kind of fill it in and keep going. I think if I hadn't have had some kind of structure to follow, you could very easily get overwhelmed, derailed, overthink, not finish.
Yeah, great advice. Alice, what would you share?
Well, probably I would say, as someone, I suppose, that came at it with not having an identity as a writer, I was really curious, maybe slightly anxious about how I'd find the process of sort of sitting down and doing the actual writing. And I absolutely loved it. I think it was just it was so relaxing. It was such a change of pace from what I, kind of do normally, that it was almost meditative, and I think, look, it was because it wasn't a blank page and we already knew and had loads of ideas, it was easy to write in a way. But I guess I would say, I don't think not having written much before should put people off from trying to write a book if they feel that they've got an important message or something valuable to share, fiction or non-fiction. So I just would say it was just such an excellent decision, best decision ever. Like, loved the process of writing it, not because it was always easy. Obviously don't do what we did, try to kind of not write 50% of the book 3 weeks before the deadline. That's what I think. I think it's inevitable. I just literally think that there's no way around it.
It's inevitable for us, Alice. I think there are many other people who couldn't possibly work like that, but this is how we work, and this is one of our saving graces, right? It's that kind of pragmatism when it comes to it.
Yeah. And then I would say publishing this book has been kind of life-changing for us. So
it's very true.
I just couldn't recommend it more, really.
I would completely agree with that. Thank you so much for your time today. If we can finish by telling us where we can find you, your services and your book.
So the website is thepowerhouse.company, and you can find our services and what we do. There's also a couple of cool diagnostics on there. So if you want to find out your own default conflict style as an individual, you can do that. If you want to explore your team's conflict style, there's a team diagnostic as well. And there's some read along PDFs that you can use with the book to sort of deepen your understanding and deepen your reading that you can download there. And the book is on Amazon and in Waterstones and wherever you get good books. Smart Conflict, How to Have Hard Conversations at Work. You'll find it easily.
A bit of a mission to get some more reviews. So Helen, I'm looking forward to seeing your review on Amazon when you're ready.
You should already find it there.
Listeners who end up buying the book, your reviews are so appreciated.
And actually, that's a really good piece of advice to close on, because just like when you launch a coaching practice and getting testimonials is really hard, with a book, getting reviews is a lot more difficult than you think it is.
But really
yet they make so much difference to helping discoverability. So if anybody is reading your book or any book that they think is amazing, just take 2 minutes and leave a review and leave the kind of positive reader karma out in the world.
It doesn't need to be, paragraph long, but it all really, really helps.
Completely agree. What a brilliant piece of advice to close on. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you for joining me today. You can get the show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachwrite.co.uk. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Your words can make a difference. A review can too. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, O'Neill Helen, that's O'Neill, ONEILL, or on Instagram at coach_write. I'll see you for the next chapter of Coach Write.